So today we're going to talk about leveraging student, what are we talking about? Student tech choices, I think is what it's officially called. Again, I want to point out that on the activity sheet, we have this top paragraph links to a self-enrollment to a Canvas course. You can find all of this information on the Canvas course. We've got the activity sheet linked, embedded on here, and also linked on it. This up in yellow here is a link to this survey, which we have 254 respondents from students about the technology that they use. Feel free to look through that and see what sticks out. I have not run it through any coding program other than after I got the first 80. I can share what I got from those first 80-ish students, but now I've got a lot more students, so I don't know if that's valid anymore. All right. So the way that we start this is we usually go around and we ask you to think about who you are and why you're here, so that you can share any questions that you want to make sure that we talk about today. And the reason we do this is to be as responsive to your needs and interests as possible. So, I'm John Martin. I work at the Active Teaching Lab for Doing Academic Technology in the Teaching Academy. And in all these Active Teaching Labs, we've always talked about what the instructors see, what the instructors experience, and we try to infuse good pedagogy as much as possible. But we don't hear a lot from the student perspective or the student voice. So I'm very interested in this topic, and I'm starting a fellowship on it next year where we're going to look into it a little bit more, and that data is based on preparing for that. I want to engage more students and student organizations in figuring out what are they actually doing, what are they telling each other, what are they learning from each other about how to study, and you generally using technology is a part of it, right? Because this is always on them. They have it on the bus, and maybe they're coming to your class and they're getting ready to study for your class or getting ready to participate in your class through that. So I'm just very interested in this topic for that purpose. Who'd like to go next? Pete.
I'm Pete Vallejo. I'm from Software Training for Students. I do not teach as many instructors do, but I do have a lot of teaching exposure to students and get to see firsthand a lot of the technology world that they tend to occupy. It is very interesting and curious to see how able some students are and how non-able many other students are in terms of their general experience and skill level of things. It's always an assumption that these kids today, they know everything, like they're born with a phone in their hand. The number of students who have very surprising amount of challenge with very simple things has been continually surprising and illuminating to me, where downloading files, zipping files, opening things, saving projects, putting things onto the internet, all the things that you, as someone who may be familiar with technology, would assume they can do, many of them do not have the facility you would expect. So
Excellent.
that's my main experience of recent times. Then there's some who are just total whizzes, and it just my jaw hits the floor, and I'm like, well, I'm done. So.
All right. Yeah. Tom, Sally.
I'm Sally. I'm a graduate student in educational psychology, and I'm teaching a class on how people learn for undergrads. So it's been interesting to talk to students about how they actually go about things, and I really wanted to see what students said about how they would use technology.
And a lot of the students on the survey were from Sally's class, and you can have your students take that survey too. Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm from the Center for First Year Experience right across the hall. I'm the technology coordinator there. I'm fairly new to campus. I'm actually going to be teaching next year for the Wisconsin Experience Seminar. So that'll be an interesting experience, and hopefully get some more responses from them next semester. And my interest, a lot of my work is finding ways to help students with technology and reaching students with technology. We have various different projects in our office and growing different projects and current systems in our office to help better fit the needs of our students. So I felt like this would be a great way to find out what our students are using, what our students are thinking, and figure out ways that we can help support them both in and out of the classroom.
All right, thank you. Heidi.
I'm Heidi, and I teach English as a second language in the program at ESL. And I'm interested in students' reading preferences and how that may change depending on the assignment and the course. Do they like to read static Canvas pages, download PDFs, read on Google Docs, and so on, or print on paper?
All right, great.
I'm Mandy Morrow, Associate Director of Design Lab, and I'm interested in a discussion about using tech as, like, whether or not it's effective or a gimmick.
Oh, good, good. Dustin.
Yeah, I'm Dustin Cowell, faculty emeritus from African Studies, and I do volunteer consulting with universities in Indonesia that are teaching English and Arabic as a foreign language.
I'm Megan. I teach at the med school. I have somewhat slightly older students, so we're starting to see more of a transition from paper to text. So I'm interested in seeing kind of what, if people work with grad students, if they're seeing that transition. And also we've been introducing more online projects that the students can do, and so it's interested in finding out what people think are maybe some of the best things that are easy for the students to use, so we're not bogging them down with too much technology.
All right. I'm gonna,
It probably fell in there.
so yeah, something about like, are the digital natives, like, what is the difference between the freshmen and the graduate students that we're dealing with right now, and how is that changing? I don't know how to put that. Trends, thank you. Gabby.
I'm Gabi. I'm an instructional designer at UW Extended Campus. We never really hear anything about the student side of things, so anything you say is going to be interesting to us.
Okay.
Great. And I'm Laurie Berry. I work with Gabi at Extended Campus, also an instructional designer. And we don't hear the student side, so it'd just be interesting to hear what they use or want to use, things like that, because we're always pushing for the faculty side, but we don't know if it works, how well do they like it, does it cause trouble, and they just have to use it because that's what we're recommending for them, or just to get more perspective on their side.
There's this, the idea in webs like opt-in, opt-out, or push and pull, right? Do you want your calendar pushed to you so you get the notifications, or do you want it to be pulled so you won't know unless you go look on your calendar? I'm getting that out of this. Like, so far we've been pushing to the faculty, but not pulling from the students. So, yeah, we should involve in their learning somehow.
I'm Lauren. I work with language teachers from around the state, and actually later this month I'll be doing a course redesign retreat and workshop for moving more towards blended and online courses for language educators.
You have to be a language educator to sign up for your course?
Well, you could still come because it's the pedagogy behind it, but as you know, yes, right here on campus. In any case, one of the pieces that I want to hit on is the way students learn, because, well, for many obvious reasons, but I'm taking a lot of language teachers who have been in a traditional classroom for a while and taught in a certain way, and are having trouble with this transition, but I think it's also good timing for them to, if they're going to be changing things, to change things with a different lens than what they're used to using. So thinking a little bit more about how students today are learning. I too am old and don't learn the same way that today's students learn.
Yeah, so that's also in some ways, part of the trends and change management, maybe, both for instructors and for students.
I think it's really hard to look at it from a completely different lens than you have been when you feel really comfortable with what you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, your comfort levels are really stick in. Carolyn?
So, I'm Carolyn Daughtry Krell, and I work here upstairs in academic technology as an instructional designer, and so kind of similar to other instructional designers who spoke, just interested in more of the student perspective and what insights you all will be sharing and I can glean from.
Tanu?
Hi, I'm Tanu. I'm a PhD student in education leadership. My topic of research is technology use in Indian government schools. But before, and I'm doing my fieldwork in India, but before all that I was a teaching TA in education leadership department on technology for leadership class for 3 years. And I have extensive experience in using Wikipedia and Canvas in classes. And so something that I'm also a computer science engineer, so I take to technology fairly easily than other people. I think, that was obvious when I did the Wikipedia courses with students, because it was just so interesting to see these teachers who know so much, but trying to explain them how to create a Wikipedia page around the topic as a class project. That just took me through this whole curve of, oh, this is interesting, how people interact with what's fairly obvious to me, but seeing how people interact with that. So I'm very interested in knowing what we talk about here today.
Excellent, thank you. Jen?
My name's Jen Frank. I'm faculty in engineering physics. So I teach a lot of computational classes where our lives are pretty much digital. We have codes and sharing of codes and collaborative projects, and I agree with Pete that I had to walk some students through some things that I thought they would know better than me, how to share stuff on Google Drive and stuff. So I am interested in hearing insight into their perspective and what tools they prefer, and if I could gear things in their direction instead of me imposing stuff on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom?
I'm Tom Bryan. I'm an instructor in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, teaching non-majors courses generally. And we use tech and pretty heavily in the course. We have some students completing the lab on their phones, the little Bluetooth keyboard, because they don't want to buy the binder, and they don't want to haul a laptop around, and that's A-okay. We designed it openly. And yeah, heavy Canvas use in the course, lots of videos. But my other life is also at the Greenhouse Learning Community, where I manage a greenhouse and a garden, and it's very untech. And so I'm interested, where's too much tech, and where is it not appropriate? Like in a gardening course, we don't do it much, but where's the good fit, and which pieces of tech are really good fits for some classes and which are really off. So I'm interested in that. Also, the hatred for top hat and eye clickers is very obvious. What's the better top hat? Top hat was the better eye clicker. What's the better top hat?
This is good.
It's so obvious that yeah, it's scalding of top hat.
That's not vaccine response.
Yeah.
Yeah, they love top hat and they hate it. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Margaret.
Hello, I'm Margaret. I'm a grad student at the iSchool, and I'm here to help Jen with the Active Teaching Lab.
Very good. And Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm a PhD student in curriculum instruction, and my dissertation is on mobile language learning. So I'm just generally interested in what programs students choose to learn which skills. And not for language for my dissertation, but in general, I'd be interested in seeing how they use it in other subject areas to apply to language.
Excellent. Make sure you talk to Laurie.
Hello, I'm Matthew. I also work for software training for students. So I think for me, what I'm interested in is, since we work with student trainers, they're one step closer to that, understanding how students learn, but they're not teachers, they're not necessarily they're not majoring in education.
Right.
So trying to translate what they have, or trying to build up what they already know, without necessarily taking over all the time.
Excellent. And James?
James McKay. I'm on the consultant on the Learning W team. We support instructors, but ostensibly for student success. So it's always good to kind of be plugged in a little bit, even though we don't directly interact with students.
90 for years of putting keeping up with students is, how many of you have the TikTok application on your phone? How many of you have heard of TikTok? Okay, so good. Yeah, it's probably better if we don't have it at this point. It's one of those things that you can try to keep up, but at some point you just have to say, it's for a different audience. It's for a different and yet you want to be involved, right? As instructors, as adults, we want to know, like, we like kids. We want kids to, to like us. We want to be in, and so that we can connect with them, so that we can teach them and have conversations where we're not total strangers because we know nothing about their culture. So there's this balance in keeping up with them. And oftentimes it's very easy for us to just say, kids these days, they're going to do their thing, and eventually they'll grow up and then we can talk to them and have meaningful conversations. But in the meantime, we'll just stay superficial with them. Learning and teaching is a really potentially intimate sort of endeavor, because as soon as you see that aha moment, like that aha moment is a super important growth moment, and we love to be involved in that. So the impulse for us to connect and to find out what they're doing is there, but we don't know how to do it. It's tricky. The idea of digital natives, or, boy, I thought they'd know how to do this. I think it was Prensky who came up with the term, and forgive me if I'm wrong with that, but this idea that a lot of us are digital immigrants. We've sort of come into this digital culture and we're starting to learn it, but not as, we have to learn everything from new. And for many of us, myself included, until we got the Apple IIe when I was in 8th grade, it was like I had no idea what computers were really. But then it was like, all right, I'm excited. I'm going to learn about this. This is new and exciting. And I did. And I got involved, and I went in and took on tasks that were way more complicated than I should have, probably, and I messed a lot of things up, and it's all part of the growth process, right? But students today were born with these things, and so we always assume, or we often assume, that they know how to do all of these things that were really, really hard for us to learn. And when we learned them, they were really, really hard, but we suffered through them because we wanted to do them. Now a lot of the things are easy, and the people who are trying them are just saying, if it's not easy, there are other things I can do. Why should I work so hard to do this one thing when I can work hard to do this next thing that I want to do? Pete?
To that point, I've noticed that there's this 5 to 8 year age range of people who I think are digital natives, because they were young enough that they sort of knew the world before the internet and tech was a thing, but they were still also fresh enough to be able to absorb it and get it. And then if you were on either side of that, you either had you're just it's too complicated to understand, or you came of age of it where it was already made so user-friendly enough that you didn't have to be. It's it was the digital equivalent of camping in the backyard, where it's you're having to do stuff, but it's not really that hard. And so there's that window of people who are native of that, but on either side you're sort of I don't know. And especially for students today, you can be super proficient with technology only using things that have been very specifically curated and developed to be easy and accessible and affordable and give a lot of leeway to someone who doesn't have a lot of technical skill. And so that's a thing that I think, especially with people who are, say my sort of age range of mid-30s and older, just assume, everybody has that same level of experience with the hard stuff, when so many of it is just if there's not a button for it, I'm not going to do it. And
right.
It's
Mandy?
Yeah, so on that line, students, so many of them have learned how to use PowerPoint, and it's we just sort of assume every student knows how to use PowerPoint. But just because every student knows how to, the general concepts of PowerPoint, there are tons of tools within PowerPoint that they don't know how to use. Or they know how to use certain tools that are not really good tools.
Yeah. And
so there's a lot of even range within those digital natives that have been using PowerPoint since they were in 1st, 2nd grade to make little presentations that don't know anything about it. But the other thing is that I think that when it comes to tech, right, in general, a lot of times there are so many component parts, right? So we can assume a student might know how to make a video, for example, right? The students know how to take out their phone and they know how to record a video, but that doesn't translate to them making something that is quality enough to go on YouTube. They know how to record something, but
although that bar is really low.
YouTube, okay, whatever. But maybe a little higher than that. But they don't know how to edit it, right? They might know how to cut the ends off or something like that, but they don't know how to do white balance or they might not know even what is good framing. So there are so many component parts to creating some of the technology as well that students are having to create that they don't think about those pieces and just sort of go, oh, you know how to do this, just do it. And so there's even within the digital native there's still lacking knowledge and sometimes massive gaps in their knowledge of what they should know but don't.
Technology lets them do things,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that they can do it well.
Exactly.
I've encountered that same thing, and we used to assign this final project that it was the turn-in was a PowerPoint because that was the tech we were most familiar with. And then we started getting all these requests, so can I make a video? Can I do a podcast? And so we just opened it up and said, whatever tech you're most comfortable with, because some students professionally made a cooking show. And the bar for the assignment was a 4-slide PowerPoint, and they made a 10-minute cooking show, edited, special effect, it was glorious.
Yeah.
And they just say, hey, can we do this? And it was, all right.
So
go for it.
There's an idea here. There's sort of this digital canon, right? Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, the things that were the first tech that folks of our age, I'm using that term broadly, learned to learn and figure out. And we thought they would never go away. Microsoft 5.1 was still a classic for 10 years. People preferred that version. And now things change all the time. And there are so many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of apps out there that let you do similar things. And some of them come and then they go, and people learn them, and then they forget them, and they move on to the next thing. And that's really hard, I think, for me to do. I'm still sticking with sort of the keep it simple. Let's hang on to Google. Let's hang on to Microsoft. Let's, because I know these things, I'm comfortable with them. Back to that comfort zone. But yeah.
But that's an idea. I don't have to know how to edit a video.
As instructors, we're taught that we need to be in charge of everything, right? We need to understand all of the technology and all of the parts of the assignment, otherwise we can't assign it, right? But that's not true.
Yeah, and fortunately it was a pretty low stakes assignment. It was pretty casual. It had a fun element to it, so.
Yeah.
Listen, that's absolutely true. Because you can still grade on content.
Yep.
And you should.
And I deal with instructors all the time who come in and say, well, I don't know how to do this, so I don't think I should assign my students this. And I'm like, well, that's exactly why you should assign your students stuff so that you can learn too, right? Because we still need to learn. We're never stop. Who as an instructor thinks that you should stop learning, right? But we have to learn along with the students sometimes, and sometimes that means messing things up and maybe not knowing what you need to know and stuff like that. But I think that you can always still grade on the content. So not being afraid to do stuff. But at the same time, when you were talking about things there's all these things that come in and out, and teaching your students these sort of new up and coming apps that might disappear and fizzle out because they don't get their whatever funding from Silicon Valley.
Right.
There's another level to that too. It's just how do you balance that? How do you balance what is good stuff to be doing and not?
So I find it interesting too, Tom, right? That you were talking about it as a low stakes assignment, because I usually would think about that in terms of the high stakes assignment, where I assign this is what you need to show me you know.
However,
and I don't care how you do it, because the reality is I don't want to look at 50 PowerPoint presentations.
Right.
That's really boring for me.
I remember when they used to do 5-page papers.
Right, I don't want to look at everything that always looks the same. So as much as possible, and I tend to think about it more in the high stakes, but I should be thinking about it in low stakes assignments too, where I say, here's what you need to show me, I don't care how you do it. And if you bring it in on cardboard because we're in a traditional classroom instead of doing something digital, that's okay too, as long as you've shown me you know these things.
Natty and Pete, from software training for students perspective, how much of your classes are still press the buttons, and how much of them are frame the shot? You know, how much of them are the aesthetic, the sort of tool agnostic elements, and how much of it is this button, that button?
Historically, there's been a lot of this button does this thing, but we've actually recently added some classes that Natty's helped put together that are a lot more design focused rather than tool focused specifically. So,
yeah, so I feel like a lot of our workshops historically have been like, this is a tool, use it, but there's no really like, what could you potentially use this tool for? So like, I think a lot of our manuals at the end of the day, the students would be like, oh, I know what each tool does, but I don't actually know what to create with each tool. So I think we're going more into like the big picture, like this is what design things should look like or something.
And there are certain steps that are similar regardless of what the tool is. And I think that the more that we can focus on, regardless of what tool you use, you want to do this thing, and then you want to do this thing, and they should connect in this way. But what button's there, that's not so important. And I think that in learning, and maybe Sally, you can speak on this, how do students learn? How are they, I imagine they're not using the same tools, although I imagine also that they're saying, oh, I was using that one. I see that you're using this one, Laurie. That looks a lot cooler. And they learn from each other, as we have always done. And so they pick up through word of mouth, but not necessarily because it was assigned by an instructor.
One sort of interesting thing, not to talk too much, but something I found that's really interesting is how one may think a tool is best for one thing, but when you get down into it, you can do a lot of the same stuff with a lot of different tools. Like PowerPoint has 80% of the design functionality that Illustrator has, but you never think of it as a design program because it's always for making slideshows. But it's a really easy and accessible way for people to put things together. They just, the defaults are better in Illustrator, so you make something and it's like, oh, that looks cool, versus PowerPoint, which is like, that looks like a PowerPoint. And so figuring out ways that you can make something that is tool agnostic and so focus on the output rather than the process is, I think, an important thing with technology, because so many things can do so many things today.
And writing that intentionally into the assignment.
Yeah.
Like, I'll throw out an example, right? Like, we have been working with a lot of courses that are doing, we call them graphic essays, and they're doing it on Sway, which is a Microsoft program. But what it really is a graphic essay. And so instead of teaching them tools of Sway and saying, well, here's how you make a Sway and what you do with the Sway, but like, this is a graphic essay, here's what a graphic essay should include, here's how you cite things in a graphic essay, sort of talking about it from that conceptual, and then going, okay, now here's the tool, look at it, it's practically Facebook with a little bit of heavier, organization stuff, but it's easy upload, drag and drop steps. So like, why focus on the tool when you can focus on the content sometimes, because it's, sometimes the tools are really easy.
Is Sway the required platform for that assignment?
From that instructor, yes.
Okay,
Other instructors, no. We've had in the past them say, you can do a graphic essay, you can do it in Sway, you can do it in Word, you can do it in Canva, whatever program you feel like.
So this is maybe a question for Sally. I'm thinking about graphic essays, and John, you brought up, remember the 5-page compositions and so forth.
So important.
Today's students, do they actually perform and demonstrate a better product if they're taking what used to be in a 5-page essay and doing it in a graphical way? We had one session where somebody came in and talked about the graphical syllabus or whatever it was called, where it was, rather than just pages of paragraphs, it was actually laid out almost like a newsletter. Do students learn better or read better, or understand better when it's presented that way to them?
Can I adjust better to differently?
Or today's students, right?
Right, which again is too broad of a brush.
Right.
There's a ton of research out there about the connection of visual and text, right? That because it's called the dual encoding theory, which is that when you see a word, right, you're only encoding the word. You see a picture, you're encoding the image, or like, so it could be a picture, a drawing, something, whatever, the visual plus the word. So your brain is doing two things at the same time, like dual encoding, so that therefore, because it's dual coding, it's more likely to stay in the memory for longer. So where single encoding, which is a word, it gets lost.
And this is the
because it's
basis
not
of
doing that.
multimodal
Yeah,
well, or even universal design, giving them
right.
multiple means of representing,
Mhm. Yeah.
expressing, and understanding things.
Yeah, so sometimes they call it the picture superiority effect, which is what a lot of people know of, but yeah, dual coding is what it comes down to.
Or a picture's worth a thousand words.
So, yeah.
I mean, they just both have different affordances, right? So like visual images, you can change something in size, right? So you can get a better sense of this is more important to pay attention to, right? Or maybe it's a story and it's about how certain things relate, right? So, so if you want people to kind of get a quick, like infographics, when you think about that, you can like very quickly get the information and you can dive into more detail, and so it affords certain things like that. But text also affords certain things as well, right? It allows you to put together a sequential story. There's a whole lot of other things. I know less about it because my lab actually studies visuals, but there are certain affordances that text will bring. So it kind of just depends on, right, what you're trying to emphasize. And what I think is, like, in asking students to do an assignment, they'll just do whatever is most efficient, right? And for the most part, typing is most efficient, especially in the tools that we have, right? If you're taking notes, etc. So yeah, it really just depends on which way will make the most sense, because I think one thing about, like, for instance, asking students to do something using graphics, they have a learning curve too, to figure out how do we actually use the affordances of graphics to actually show information instead of just taking the text, making it prettier and whatever.
And part of that learning curve is actually really good pedagogy, because they have to start thinking about, all right, I know what the words are for this, I could write a paragraph about this, but how do I represent it visually? What are the important things to highlight? What are the things that I can leave out? Like, they're making all of these choices from blooms of analysis and synthesis and all the other elements, but then they're creating something, right? So in some ways, it's also the multiple modes of representing what they know or expressing what they know. They have to think about it more deeply and from different perspectives, not just a textual perspective, but from an image or visual perspective too. So it is more work for them, and therefore they resist it, right? Because they're students, they want to learn, but they also have to survive. They've got to learn in all of these other classes. So oftentimes, as much as we can keep it simple, let them use the tools that they're already comfortable with, so that instead of spending that cognitive energy in learning the tool, they can spend the cognitive energy on how do I represent this in a different form. And I think that that's sort of a big truth of, if anything, out of this session. And we want to do that too as instructors, right? We don't want to learn new tools, unless they're really cool, but even then we want them to be cool and easy. And part of being cool is that they are easy and not super complicated. And I used to spend a lot of time like figuring out how to do these really high-end detailed stuff. And it would work, and then the tool would change, and I'd be like, well, that was a waste of 3 months of learning, because I don't want to ever do that again. You know, it's going to burn me once, sort of thing.
I think sort of along those lines too, when the only tool you have is a Word doc, everything looks like an essay. So it's like, if all you know how to do is write, then you're only going to say do papers there, and it's like, from there, you've already got a very limited set of selections you're doing there.
Well, and so that brings up that you can do so much more with text.
So maybe one thing you could do is, if you have collaborative assignments and then you're pairing students who have different expertises, then that could be one way to get around that.
Exactly. Or write it as a poem, write it as a one paragraph. What is the tweet version of this? What is, instead of a 5-page essay, just say, do 5 different representations of this in text, or 4 in text and 1 visual, or something like that. But yeah, and we can do so much more. That's the biggest the biggest driver of change is that it used to be impossible to create a video. It used to be impossible to create a PowerPoint slide. You'd have to get to the graphics department, actually create a slide and photography and such. But now it's super easy. So our habits are changing. Our literacy is changing from text only, which was, in this form, and then to this form. And now, how many of you use the microphone on your phone to send text messages?
Oh,
yeah, it's great.
It's faster than thumb typing.
And it's more accurate than thumb typing because that autocorrect is always wrong. Let's look at some of the initial survey results. So I sent out to Drew Lakota's physiology class. He said, I've got 100 seniors. They are graduating, and I said, can I ask them some questions? And they said, yeah, it'd be a great use of their time as they reflect on things. So I said, okay, what would you give yourself advice if you knew now if you knew 4 years ago what you know as you're about to graduate? And they said, study skills, time management, get help, ask for help, find help. And oftentimes we're still in this paradigm of I'm going to do this by myself, and we encourage that. Like I was raised in that through undergrad, graduate work. The doctoral work was a lot more collaborative, but still, it was your own work, right? That's more important than doing these group papers. And then life balance. So that was kind of a neat thing to sort of see. And then I asked them the question, follow up in person, how did you get there? And they all said it was trial and error. It was I made a lot of mistakes. And I said, can we shortcut this? What if we came to you as freshmen and we said, you must learn this, you must pay attention to study skills. And they said, well, we wouldn't listen because I'm here, I was top of my class in my high school, it's totally working for me, and then I got my midterm back and I failed it. Okay, I might be a little bit more open, but it was just because I didn't apply myself. Like that process of making mistakes and learning from our mistakes is hard. One of the things that they said does work is if they hear it from other people. So if I know a friend who took a class that I'm taking now and they struggled through it and they succeeded, I'm going to ask that friend. So if we can get the students who succeed in their classes to leave a message for the students who follow them.
Okay, so it has to, it's student to student, because that was my question. Who are they going to listen to?
Exactly.
As a parent, not listening to me.
Right? We know a lot of them, they're not going to listen to us people, but who do they listen to? They listen to their peers.
Okay.
Right? Or they will listen to alumni who came through the program, provided they're not too adults.
Too adult.
Right.
Not a parent.
So think about that in your class. Do you have students who you've watched struggle and succeed? Reach out to them, ask them for, if you wrote, and maybe this is even a final assignment in this finals week question or exam that comes up, what advice would you give to yourself as you started this course? How can you succeed? And integrate that into your class so that your next set of students can say, they won't read it right away, right? But once they fail that first test, they might be like, oh, I want to find out how other people did this because I can't do it with my current set of strategies.
I've been collecting little video testimonials.
Yes.
So when I conference with my students about their writing papers, sometimes they'll say, oh, it was really helpful when I learned that tool, and I just put up my phone and I'll say, can you just say that one more time? And it would be 30 seconds, and can I have your permission? And then it's a little thing that I can share with my students. Just my students.
Chemistry is doing this formally. They are having video crews come in and 2 students who struggled and succeeded. And how did you survive? What did you learn? What did you learn to help you succeed in this class?
But the difference is this is formative. So
Yes.
this is like in the moment, like what about that specific assignment that you have, and so the next semester when I teach it, and we get to that point, here are 2 little videos that are 30 seconds from your peers last semester.
And then actually
So
writing
it's-
it into the assignment, here's how other students have succeeded, or their advice on succeeding in this assignment. Beautiful. James.
Just so you know, we're actually wrapping up a study right now with a couple of classes on campus where we're trying to explore, we're using 2 different approaches to try and get students to be more self-reflective about their learning. And one of them is like minute to minute and a half messages on topics like seeking self-help, study, whatnot. And then the other one is trying to get them to use Pattern, which is kind of a Fitbit for learning aimed at students. So sometime in the next few months, we'll hopefully have some, and we split them into 3 groups so that we can compare across 2 classes. So sometime in the next couple of months, I think we will have a poster teaching and learning forum, but we won't know the actual data until
So right before that, the night before.
And we are also presenting at the Distance Teaching and Learning Conference in
Yeah.
August, where we will actually have data to report on. So,
Laurie.
I know that life balance piece was a small percentage, but my head is not letting go of it, and I'm wondering about ways to sort of integrate that into courses. And part of the reason I'm thinking about this is I recently was on a trip with a whole bunch of adults who are all like corporate world CEO kind of people, and apparently the new thing in businesses is that they require their employees to take a certain number of days doing volunteer work outside of the company. And so with that kind of integration, which didn't exist when I was first getting jobs, I'm really wondering how that maybe that should also be a part of what we're preparing our students to really think about. I didn't think about work-life balance until probably, 10 years ago when that became a thing, right? I just...
No, it was all about work. Right. And I think like a part of that is the resilience. There's more to life than just school, so don't kill myself doing school. Go out, smell the roses, things like that. If I fail at this test, that's okay. I can get back up. I shouldn't let it dwell on it too much.
The anxiety level now of students in high school is exponentially worse than it was when I was a kid, and maybe that's partially where this is coming from.
One of the sessions for next semester is going to be on using Canvas to help your students succeed, and we're going to be talking about mental health of students and how to address that, how to help them build in that resilience so that it's not so stressful, because they come in with some stress and they're under such pressure to succeed because it's so expensive and the stakes are high, and getting a job that is meaningful and
getting a job at all
that pays for everything is harder and harder to do that.
I got caught up in life balance as well, so I want to, but I also think that life balance and study skills go hand in hand, right? Because if you have effective study skills, you have more space for life.
Right.
And so there's like a hand in hand there. So even though it's only 10%, I feel like it's 51% of study skills and life balance together.
Okay, that makes sense.
And again, it's tricky because we can show them the research and maybe we can, in nice little
but they don't want to hear it from us.
But if they hear it from somebody else, then maybe they will notice the poster that we have on the wall that links to studies on what's effective and what's not effective. Maybe, I don't know.
We build a little of that into our assignments.
Okay.
In the lab manual in the first couple weeks of course, we kind of ramp into the course, and so it's just like take 30 seconds and breathe and go thankful that it's the first week of classes and you don't have to have a 3-hour lab. We just have it a little shorter. And then also the assignments I was talking about earlier, the final exam take-home portions, we encourage them to go out and apply the course content to their own lives. And so cooking with a food waste-based cookbook, going home and taking a shower and calculating the carbon footprint and energy use of it, going out to a bike trail and picking up garbage for 2 hours. And those are low stakes because they just have to go out and do it and take some time and relax a little bit. But it's still related to course content, so it fits within a specific assignment for us. But it's still take this stuff home with you.
And in that first year experience course that you're going to be teaching, I would have the students go to the Majors Fair, and they couldn't just go to the Majors Fair. They had to go talk to
get
3
some
people.
artifacts,
and
Provide
take a
some
selfie
evidence.
with 3 different people.
Yep.
You know, and that's really embarrassing because you can do the sort of like, hi.
Yeah.
But you have to then talk to them.
So it's the best icebreaker. Can I take a photo with
Right.
you?
And then it would have like student orgs, they did the same thing with student orgs. You know, they'd say, okay, I'll talk to you, but you have to then sign up for a thing. So now they have got to go to the first meeting, and there's this sort of extra.
We do, for the energy content in your shower, we do require a G-rated photo.
Right. All right, moving on. Their favorite learning activities are applied work. So they like the hands-on work, and in many ways, that's the picking up the stuff on the trail, right? They see themselves making a difference in the world. It's working with people in the community as part of the assignment. It's talking with people that are in the field that they are going into. They see that as authentic, hands-on research, lab, that sort of stuff. Quizzing in practice, students recognize the value of it, right? Especially if they get feedback on it. You'll see later on, they hate it when they don't get the feedback. When it's summative only, if it's formative, where they get the feedback and they understand, I got this wrong and here's why I got this wrong right away, that's excellent. They appreciate that. And they appreciate that in Top Hat. When it's just a quiz with no feedback, they hate it. They hate that in Top Hat. Discussions, they actually like them, even though they
Pretend they don't.
Right, well, and in Canvas, maybe not so much, but face-to-face, they're useful. And a lot of them, as we listen in on the discussions, we always hear, oh, what are you doing tonight, you know, things like that, and not always content related, but that's still part of the important thing. So good tech, they liked it. They love these sorts of things, and even 17% liked Top Hat, which was, you know, good. The group that I was working with were seniors, so they had iClickers, and some of them still use iClickers. They really disliked iClicker. Top Hat, they liked, unless you used it for attendance only, so you make them buy this subscription and then you only use it to track them. Or the quizzes where you don't get feedback on it. They didn't like the in-class quizzes that counted towards something. And in some ways that makes sense, right? Because that forces them to prepare for class, and they're students, and I mean, we do the same thing. I just like being tested on what I'm supposed to know or come to a meeting ready for. You know, it's human nature in many ways.
I just recently read a paper on people comparing like Kahoot and Top Hat or Clickers type. So like, because Kahoot is like a competition.
Yeah.
Versus, so they were talking about how the students seem to appreciate that when they had Top Hat type questions, they wanted the feedback, and that they were ready to have that every day, or you could do it every other day, or it could be incorporated. But they really liked the Kahoot style stuff, which I thought would be, you know, like everybody's gonna like that. That's more fun. There's more competition. But they said there was a lot of burnout with that, and so I think like it kind of depends on how you're gonna present these clickers. Is it going to be a competition, or is it going to be scattered throughout? Is it going to be before the lecture, after the lecture? Kind of like, I think we really need to just, maybe we'll have more appreciation for these if we think more purposefully about how we're actually asking them the question.
And there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that we should be like, every day we're going to do this. It's like dog food and kibble, right? I can feed them every day and they'll be happy and eager for their food. Humans don't work that way. We want variety. We can't also do the thing where once a semester we use Top Hat, once a semester we introduce a new tool, use it once. There has to be like, let's do it 3 or 4 times. The first one's going to be chaotic. Why am I doing this? How do I do this? What is this like? The second time, okay, I've seen this before. The third time, okay, I like this. The 30th time, oh God, not again. Like there's a balance in there. So and it's part of the universal design, representing the content in multiple ways, getting people to think in different ways about the content, and forcing them to change things up a little bit.
And I think also just within that, using the different question types as well, getting more granular into that. Like, you know, you can have hotspots, you can have multiple choice, you can have all kinds of things. And so I think if we
They're all multiple choice.
yeah, they can pick a point, but if we can make it more interesting, it's
And if you only do a hotspot once, it's going to be hard because it's their first time using it. They don't all necessarily have the phone that works really well. Again, alternatives are always good. So if they only have a clicker type chiclet style phone or something to do, it's going to be harder to use top hat, some of these other things.
So I learned this from my students a couple years ago that Quizlet is a quizzing tool and you can use it for self, but it's also a nice legacy tool for passing course content from generation to generation.
Which means?
It's the old version of here's my binder, pass it on to the next people.
So they're making things for their friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good, right?
Yeah, as long as the instructor knows about it.
But the instructor doesn't know. All right, we had a session on mobile yesterday, and these numbers are actually now 79 because this is again with like 90 students, and now with Sally's students, it's at almost 80% have used mobile. So you should make sure that you look at your course on this device, and if it doesn't look good, try to figure out what doesn't work and what does work.
Does it look good on your browser on your mobile device or the Canvas app?
We talked about look at all of those because it looks very different, and it always looks worse on your browser on your mobile than it does in the app.
So for this question, are you just saying that they just like look at the homework assignment? Oh, this is due today, and then they go to their laptop and do it, or are they, working on their phone and doing it?
The question is, have you used your mobile device to complete coursework? And it's very broad that way, right? Because I didn't want to make it too confusing. So I wanted everything. So what I envision is that a lot of them use it on the bus on the way in, to class. And they're like, did I do everything that I needed to do? Let me quick check my to-do list there, or the calendar. And then would you, if it were easier? Because I think these things keep changing. They've gotten a lot better, and they're going to keep getting better. That was extra questions. There's one other question that I didn't have in this. But all right, in the last minute, what did we do? Oh, how to get student input. Did we answer that? Ideas?
Ask them.
Ask them. Yes. Ask them as part of the assignment.
Yeah.
Because if you ask them, not hey, did you use mobile to do this, but what was your process in doing this? If you can get them to reflect on what they did to answer the question, it's kind of like show your work. It's kind of like, I have to go back and I have to rethink, what did I do? And every time they rethink or think again, reflect on what they did to solve this, that's another time that they're reviewing the content. They're looking at the content. They're thinking about the content. Every time they do that, those little synapses get stronger. So that's good. Give them points for that.
I'm a big fan of mid-semester doing that, so that way if they tell you something that you could use to change what you're doing right then instead of waiting until the end of the semester when they're gone.
Do it in every assignment.
Or
do it
that
in every
too.
question or on every test. Make at least one question be a reflection question. Lindsay.
I was going to say the same thing just throughout the semester, but especially before they do something rather than after and say, did you like it or not? It's like, well, it's too late. Kind of.
Right.
So maybe beforehand, like if it's a flexible course, like to do something artistic, creative, you could say, what are you interested in doing? First of all, do you have an idea of what kind of media you'd like to use? Would you consider any of these? Kind of give them some links to explore before they even start to see. And when they get it back, before they even turn it in, when they get it back, you could see it and say, well, nobody's really interested in that, or people don't know that exists, or they don't even know how to use it, or whatever. And you can kind of even change your assignment based on what they don't know how to do, or maybe you'll force them to do it because they don't know how. But
which sometimes we need to do that. Right? We need to learn new tools. But yeah, scaffolding, having for a high stakes assignment especially, this is what is due this week. What do you think so far? This is what is due the next week. Which way are you going? How are you going to move this forward? The third week, this is what are your thoughts on this process? All right, we're out of time. Thank you for coming. If you could, on your way out, hit this little sheet up and thanks for your input. We didn't hit all of the questions. I'm sorry. Is it a gimmick? No, I think it's here. Until, the zombie